So of course, before I really get into the meat of this video, I'm going to have to say obvious content warning. It's a Resident Evil game. It's spooky. It's scary. There is a lot of gore. There is a lot of violence. You're going to see that in this video. So if you don't want to see it, go ahead and turn it off. So I picked up Resident Evil Requiem, and a lot of that is just based on the strength of the reviews. Personally, I'm not like a huge Resident Evil fan. Resident Evil 4 was a really big one for me as a kid, a teenager, whatever. And Resident Evil 5 a little bit as well, because my friend and I were big fans of Resident Evil 4, and so we ended up picking up Resident Evil 5 and playing together, because it's a co-op game, so that was pretty fun. But I've never really been one for the really horror-focused games in the Resident Evil series. And as a result, I've really missed quite a few. I've not really been paying too much attention to them for a while. And so Resident Evil Requiem, they, started getting really, really good reviews. And so it's like, okay, it's the best reviewed Resident Evil game in a while. I'll pick it up, I'll try it out. I think that if you are looking for one of the more action-focused Resident Evils, this is probably not going to be it for you. So they really are leaning on trying to go back to the like survival horror, like, hey, like every little resource counts. You're like trying to escape from enemies that can basically infinitely respawn, or that you can't hurt or whatever. And it's really about trying to navigate the levels, find the stuff you need, get out, and it's a lot more about running away and picking your fights rather than really just, mowing down every single zombie there is. And to that end, basically, they have two main characters. So there's the new character, Grace Ashcroft, whose whole shtick is that she's kind of useless in combat. She's an anxious little nervous Nelly, like, she is not having fun. And basically what she does is like, yes, you get a gun, yes, you can use it, but really what she's doing most of the time is trying to run away from enemies. She is trying to hide. She's trying to manipulate enemies. And I do think that that's something that goes really well with her gameplay, is that they really made a lot of really good and very interesting encounters. So the way that they framed it in this game is that the zombies kind of basically repeat actions or behaviors from their former lives. And so basically, there's like the guy who's the chef, and he just kind of like goes around hacking up meat in his kitchen repeatedly. There are like various guys who's, kind of just keep turning the lights off. They just mumble about turning the lights off. And so you can distract them by basically turning lights on so that they then go to try and turn them off. There's like a lady who's like an opera singer, and so she just kind of like wails and moans a lot. And then some of the other zombies will kind of get distracted by that and pay attention to her. It's little touches like that that are actually really interesting. It's really more about sort of learning the different behaviors of the different zombies and trying to figure out, okay, what do I do in this situation? How do I get past? What do I do next? It's not just like, hey, how do I shoot somebody or whatever. And of course, that stuff does happen. There'll be times where like you mess stuff up and you just end up running into like 4 guys at once, and you just have to like shoot some things really quick before you can run away. But really, gunplay is not really her focus. And then of course, the other times you're playing as Leon, series classic. He's back, cooler than ever. He's super, super cool. They make him seem very, very cool, like, all the time, like, all of his cutscenes, he's, like, being a badass. His sequences are a lot more action-focused. They're basically, like, something that you'd see in Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 5, where it's very much like, hey, there's a bunch of enemies, mow them down, finish the level, whatever. And there are some interesting variations on that stuff, too. Like, for example, there's this segment early on where a guy attacks you with a chainsaw, and that's a very common thing in the Resident Evil 4, for example, where you get these bigger enemies that have chainsaws, and they can basically kill you instantly. But the interesting thing about the chainsaw is that it doesn't just, it's not just one enemy. Basically, the chainsaw is actually an item, and so if you kill the one enemy with the chainsaw, maybe another enemy picks it up, or maybe it ends up kind of spinning around on the floor because, it's still running, and then maybe it, like, chops the legs off some zombies nearby, or maybe you get too close and it hurts you. Then you can also, of course, pick it up and use it on enemies as well. Like, there are some interesting, advancements on the gameplay there. However, I will say that it's pretty obvious from playing the game so far that I would say that they definitely are not trying to emphasize the action sequences. It's very much like very, very long sequences where you play as Grace for a very, very long time, interspersed with like very short sequences where you play as Leon for like 5 minutes. And that's, I think, my only real like gripe with the game so far, is that that's not really for me. Again, I'm really one of the more action focused people in the franchise, the things I enjoy in the franchise. And so this isn't quite my cup of tea, really. I certainly have fun, I certainly enjoy it, but at the same time, it's just, not really my style. And I will say that this is also a game that very much plays a lot with light and darkness. There are a lot of segments where like you just can't see anything whatsoever because they're not lit at all, and basically you have to, find lighters, flashlights, whatever, so that you can then come back and actually navigate. Or, stuff like I mentioned earlier, like there are light switches that you turn on and then zombies that'll try and turn them off, or there are zombies that are afraid of light and will run away from it, that sort of thing. They definitely play around with lighting a lot, and it's really well done. But I personally don't find darkness to be a fun mechanic in most cases. Like, just not being able to see what you're doing is like a very frustrating gameplay aspect for me personally. And so a lot of these sequences where you're playing as Grace and you're just kind of stumbling around in the dark, yes, great, masterfully well done, great example of the genre, of the format, but I also just struggle with it at times. I don't enjoy it as much. I'm not super, super deep into the game so far. Obviously, you're just seeing some gameplay stuff from the early bits of the game here, but I am really enjoying it so far, even though it's, again, not really quite my cup of tea, not really quite my style of Resident Evil that I enjoy the most. It's fun. It's a very, very good horror game, and it definitely leans a lot more on the horror side of things than on the action side of things. So if that's something that you are into, if those are the bits of the Resident Evil series that you like, then you'll probably enjoy that as well.
Editing Adam here. So apologies for any changes in the microphone or whatever. I also have to add something that came up is that I've seen people online talking about how this Resident Evil solved, quote unquote, the problem of yellow paint, which is very funny because, first of all, I made a video previously talking about yellow paint and how it's actually a good thing. And the actual example I used was Resident Evil 4, and in comparison to the Resident Evil 4 remake, which makes heavy use of yellow paint, and how the original Resident Evil 4 basically didn't really need it because the graphics were simpler and the gameplay itself was streamlined in such a way that you didn't necessarily need that sort of thing. But then when you made a more hyper-realistic version that you saw in the Resident Evil 4 remake, yellow paint became a necessity because when you're playing an action game like that, you really need to be able to know where you're moving and where you're going at all times, and you need very clear and obvious indicators that tell you where to go next. And the only real way to do that in the game, aside from pointing, a big obvious, red arrow or something, is the use of yellow paint, because yellow paint breaks your immersion just enough that you notice it, and it directs you, and it guides you, and it leads you towards things. Well, I saw people saying, hey, Resident Evil Requiem fixed yellow paint, which is so funny because this game uses so much yellow paint, the exact yellow paint methodology. Sometimes it is literal yellow paint, sometimes it is yellow police tape, which features really heavily in the early segments where you play as Grace. Sometimes there's stuff where they have breakable things that are, held together by yellow straps that you can shoot or whatever. Like, this game uses so much yellow paint. The only real difference is that it's maybe slightly more subtle about it. Instead of making all of the crates yellow paint, they've got like a yellow label on them that's a bit smaller, so it's still evident that it's supposed to be marked by a yellow paint analog, but it's not specifically yellow paint. That is the sort of thing that they did. They basically kept yellow paint, they made it very slightly more subtle, and I'm seeing people online going like, oh, they fixed it, they removed yellow paint. No, they didn't. They kept it in. It's the exact same thing. It's still yellow paint. I don't know what you're going on about. Anyway, that's all.
Anyway, that's really all that I have to say on it. It's a good game. Pick it up if you're interested. Try it out. Have a good week. I'll talk to you all next time. Don't forget to smash the like button, comment down below, subscribe, smash the notification bell, all that stuff you do. Have a good week. I'll talk to you later.